Due to inclement weather, we are having just a quick sermonette here that we're going to be posting on YouTube and on Twitter. So we encourage everybody, of course, to listen. Just some quick announcements before we do that. First off, Thursday night at 7 o'clock, starting at 7 o'clock, we're going to have a prayer and Bible study over at the Jansen's house. It's going to be every other Thursday night that we'll be doing this. Also, don't forget about Mailing of the Souls coming up this Friday and Saturday. There are books that are for sale for $11.19 a piece. Also, at the same time, if you look out there on the table, there are Max Lucado books out there that are for free if you'd like to pick one up or give one away. Also, don't forget that Joanne needs to know how many people are going to be here for the meal planning coming up on March 5th. So there's a sign-up sheet out there, and as well there's a sign-up sheet for prison ministry. If you're interested in doing working in our prison ministry that's coming up, then there's a sign-up sheet for back in the back as well for you to turn in so that we can get those back to the prison. So this morning we are looking at Matthew chapter 5, verse 38 to 42. This is the title of the sermon is "There is More to Life Than You," because that's really what Jesus was trying to get at here and trying to tell us in his speaking at the Sermon on the Mount. So I'm going to go ahead and read that for you. "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. And if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you." So the background of this passage actually comes out of Exodus. It goes all the way back to Jesus, to Moses, when he was there at Mount Sinai. And there at Mount Sinai, God comes to him and talks. And he basically says this. He says, and Jesus was right when he said, "You've heard it said that this is what's going on." And so God says, "But if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe." Those are the words that God had given to Moses that was being passed down through the ages, and so the Pharisees were right. The Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes were right when they would say an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. The problem was that they weren't taking in the context of what was going on. If you go back and you look at Exodus chapter 21, and you look at the context of it, you look at verse 22 here, you'll find out that it says, "When men strive together and hit a pregnant woman so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hit her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. But if there is harm," and that's where he goes on to say, if there is harm, right, "then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth," and so on. So the context of this is actually a courtroom. The idea of it is to actually be judged by a judge, and what the judge has determined is what we are supposed to follow through on. This is not a vigilante kind of justice. The entire context is exactly about justice. It is about how judgments from judges should be carried out. So the Pharisees, and not just the Pharisees, but many people today would love to quote this verse, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, because they want to go ahead and they want to have revenge. They want to have vengeance upon people. And that's not what Jesus was about, and that's not what God was talking about either. He was talking about justice. It reminds me of, and this is probably the only time that you're ever going to hear this, it reminds me of Batman Begins, right? The only time I'm ever going to quote from Batman. But there in Batman is Rachel Dawes. Rachel Dawes says the words to Bruce. She says, "Justice is about harmony. Revenge is about making yourself feel better." And that is exactly right. Justice is about harmony. It is about making everything right for everybody. It's about bringing it all together. God and God alone has the ability to do that, right? We have revenge, and we want revenge because we want to feel better about ourselves. We want to feel better about a wrong that has happened to us. God is not necessarily about vengeance as much as he is about justice. But it is God who is able to actually bring vengeance and justice and make them one and the same. With us, it's not. And so Jesus says it's not about vengeance, it's about justice, and so therefore you need to get beyond this idea of vengeance. So what happens if somebody comes up and slaps you, right? Verse 39, "But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil, but if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also." The idea here is not so much that, that you've been slapped and that you've been harmed and that you've been hurt, okay? Jesus is not at all talking about being personally harmed or not being able to defend yourself. He is actually not saying anything about pacifism. A lot of people will take this and talk about pacifism and Jesus being a pacifist and says, hey, you can't do anything. That's not what Jesus is talking about at all. That is not even in the context of it. Jesus was not advocating a complete pacifist mentality of lifestyle, no matter what anybody says here. The Bible is very clear that we are allowed to protect our home. We are allowed to protect our families. We are allowed to protect ourselves. So when Jesus says that when somebody comes and slaps you on the right cheek, you turn to them out, he's not being a pacifist, right? It's not so much the wounding of the face, though, as it is the wounding of the flesh. It is the wounding of the pride. The idea that somebody would come and slap you is not a harmful thing to you. It is a prideful thing to you. It is something that they're doing to humiliate you. That was what people would do back in the first century Judaism, is they would go and they would slap you in public in order to humiliate you in front of everybody. And so it would wound the pride, not necessarily wound the face. So he says, when somebody comes up to you and they humiliate you, or they mock you, make fun of you, don't retaliate. Don't try to get back at them. Right? He wants us to be so identified with him that when somebody comes and tries to humiliate us and harm our reputations, that we understand where our identity really lies, that it lies in Christ. It doesn't lie in ourselves. It doesn't matter what people say. It doesn't matter what people do. We know who we are in Christ. And so we don't get back. We don't retaliate. Why? Because there is more to life than ourselves. Other lives are at stake. But more than that, the glory of God, as seen by the unbelieving world, is at stake. So that's what we do when somebody comes and slaps us. What about when somebody comes and sues us, right? What's our response to sues? Look at verse 40 if you want. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. Jesus is basically saying, hey, you're going to court. You have done something wrong. Let's say, for instance, that you are building a house in first century in Judea, and you're supposed to have that fence around the top of it because that's where people are. You're up there. You're working on it. Your friend next door neighbor is up there working on it with you, and then he actually falls off. That's what the whole fence was for, right? It's to keep people from falling off the top of your house. Well, he's up there working on it and getting it set up with you, and he falls off, and now he's hurt and he's maimed, and he can't work for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks because he has a sprained leg or something like that. So he's out of wages. Well, what do? The idea is not so much that you give what is minimum, that you are required to give what is minimum, but it is actually, if you go to court and because he's suing you, you actually give more. You go above and beyond. You're not only supposed to give happily, not only to what is owed, but you give happily to go above and beyond what is actually owed. So why is that? Why is it that we're supposed to do that? Because there's more to life than ourselves. Other lives are at stake, right? But even more than that, the glory of God is at stake in an unbelieving world. And then there's, of course, the strong arm here. Verse 41, and if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. This is where we get the whole idea of going the extra mile. And it was okay, and it was actually lawful for a Roman soldier to go and pick anybody that was in occupied territory and pull them out of the crowd and give them their equipment and give them their uniforms and so forth, and they would have to walk with them. They were made to walk with them for 1 mile. We see that something similar when Jesus was crucified, when Simon of Cyrene was taken and shoved and made to carry the cross of Christ. That's the same kind of idea. And so Jesus is saying that when that happens, you don't just do what is required of you. Again, what is required of you. You actually should be volunteering to go further. Now, this was huge because, right, these are Roman soldiers. These are occupying soldiers. Nobody likes them. The only thing that would be worse than having to well, there wasn't really a whole lot that was worse than having to work for the occupation. And he says, you need to volunteer and go the extra mile. So in our modern world, we would probably look at our jobs and we were ready for the weekend, we're ready to get off on Friday night, and then the boss comes in and says, hey, can you stay just for an extra hour? And you say, you know what, I'll stay 2 hours. I'll stay until the project is done, right? Or if you're a child and your parents say that you need to go into the living room, you need to pick up your toys. You don't just pick up your toys, you pick up everybody's toys, right? Your wife tells you that she needs the car washed, or what have you, and it's a Saturday morning, and you want to go golfing, or you want to read a book, or you want to watch television, you don't just go out there and wash the car. You wax it as well. You make sure that it's all nice and pretty for your wife, right? So your neighbor maybe wants you to make sure that your yard looks nice, right? And you rake your yard. So you wouldn't just rake your yard, you would go and actually rake their yard as well and make sure that their yard looks nice. It's going extra. Why? Because life is more than just about ourselves, right? It's about other people. There are other people that are at stake. Not only that, but God's glory in an unbelieving world is at stake. So in similar fashion, Jesus addresses the issue of supplicants, and by supplicants I just mean beggars, people who beg. And to anybody that thinks that panhandling and professional panhandling is a modern phenomenon, it's not. They had it in the first century, and Jesus was aware of it. But listen to what he says. Look at verse 42. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. I remember my dad telling a story of how he was sitting at a diner, he was sitting at a counter at a diner, and there was this man, obviously homeless, sitting right next to him, and my dad felt a little guilty because he was ordering his food, knowing that this man had nothing to eat and was probably hungry. And a couple of moments later, another man just walks in from outside, sits down on the other side of this homeless man, and he orders himself some hot dogs. And he says, you know what, while you're at lunch, grab my friend some hot dogs too, and give him some hot dogs. And paid for his meal. My dad said he never forgot that. He never forgot how this one man whom they didn't know each other, but the one man that was sitting on the other side cared for him. And Dad recalled to me how nonchalantly the man spoke those words and how much dignity he allowed that homeless man to have. And it seemed like no big deal to him whatsoever. See, I think we make a big deal out of giving. We make a bigger deal than we should. Helping a person shouldn't really be a big deal, right? We're hesitant to give. We choose whom we will give to and whom we won't give to. We excuse our not giving. We make excuses for them, right? Because we don't know what they're going to do. They may buy booze with it. They may buy drugs with it. We don't know, so we better not just give it all. It's not our call. Jesus says to give to the one who begs of you and to give to the one who borrows from you. I love what my sister does. My sister actually carries around boxes of crackers, like the cheese crackers or the peanut butter crackers, and bottles of water, a bottle of water. And so whenever she's driving, and of course, you're always at the exit, and there's somebody up there holding a sign, hungry, will work for food, whatever, right? She actually rolls down her windows, gives them a couple of crackers and a bottle of water, because she wants to help them out, right? We're not supposed to enable, we're not supposed to be harmful, but we should absolutely treat people with the dignity that they deserve, the respect that we would hope to be treated with. So I love what Proverbs 3:27 says. It says, "Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to do it." Right? And so, like, the technologists might say, well, we don't know. They might go out and buy booze with it. They might go out and buy drugs with it, right? And they're not really due the good that we could do. Forget about that. If that's going to be the requirement, then none of us deserve the good that anybody would ever do to us, right? So if I have the power to do good to somebody that is in need, then they are due the good that I can give them. Now, sometimes I'm helpless, sometimes I can't do it, but when I can, when I am not helpless, then I should give it, right? I've said for many years, I would rather be called to judgment for being too generous than being too stingy. See, life isn't about us. It's about others. It's about the glory of God, about the praise of our Father. And so as we look at this, and it's continuously talking about doing what is more. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, right? That grace requires more than law. Law says don't commit adultery. Grace says don't even look at a woman in lust. Law says don't commit murder. Grace says don't be angry with your brother, right? Law says an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Grace says don't retaliate. Go beyond what is required. Because this is like Jesus. This is exactly like Jesus. Peter says, when he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. That's what we're supposed to do. We don't retaliate, but rather we entrust ourselves to the one who judges justly. It's not our reputation. It's not about our reputation. It's about God's glory. right? We go beyond what we owe, give graciously, give more than what is fair. It's not about our property. It's about the glory of God. We go beyond compulsion. Do more than what people expect or what they require. Because it's not about our time and energy, it's about the glory of God. We don't turn from the needy. We help them. We love them. We do what we are able to do. Because it's not about our money. It's about the glory of God. So let me close with this. This is G. Campbell Morgan. That's what he said. He said, the Christly soul, the man in the kingdom, is forevermore overfilling the measure, overstepping the necessity, doing that which no man had any right to expect from him. Justice becomes love-lit and full when Jesus interprets it. Thank you very much.